Hello and welcome to Glitch Report's 2023 Game of the Year award show. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the show. If you're watching this over on YouTube, thank you so much for checking out my YouTube channel. And if you are listening to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, thank you so much for checking out the show today. All good things must come to an end. 2023 is no exception. And we have today a huge collection of awards to give out. Some good, some bad. You know, your worst game will be awarded here on the show. Your most disappointing. But also we have, biggest news story, best vibes, and so much more. But I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you for your continued support of the show wherever you are checking out the Glitch Report show. It has been a great year for games, been a good year for the podcast and just for me personally in general, getting more and more of my shit together as the years go on. I also played through a ton of games this year. So, in a lot of cases, like I played through a lot of games. It wasn't just great games from this year that I played. I also played through a ton of old games. Going through my backlog, clearing out a lot of games in that backlog. All things told, this year, whether it be 2023 games or older, I managed to get through a grand total of about 37 games as of the time of this recording. I had just finished up my time with Persona 4 Golden, marking my 37th game that I had played through this year. You know what? That means I didn't get outside a lot. I didn't spend as much time working out or, dating or things like that as, other things that I could have been doing with my time. I didn't pick up a new skill, a new hobby. I didn't learn the piano. I didn't learn a new language. I didn't learn to bake, among other things. But I did learn the true meaning of fun, and that is playing through a hell of a lot of games this year. Again, going through my backlog, going through a lot of new games this year. So I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way and say thank you so much for all your support. I love talking about video games, sharing my thoughts on games, sharing the news of the world of video games with you as well. And thank you for joining me today. Let's quickly go through our award categories, and then we'll start giving out some damn awards. What do you say? A couple things to note for the kind of programming of this. Most of the categories have 3 nominees, with one of those nominees being the winner. This allows me to kind of give a spotlight on all games in every category to briefly talk about them before presenting that award to the winner. There are some exceptions to those how many games are in a category, and we're going to go through the categories, and then I will tell you what kind of changes as we go along. Kicking things off, we're going to give out the award for What's Old is New Again Game of the Year. There are 3 nominees in that category. I also have Best 2023 Game I didn't get a chance to play / game I want to get around to playing. There are 5 nominees in that category. One of those is the winner. We also have Most Anticipated Game. I thought about doing Most Anticipated for games coming out in 2024, but honestly, one thing that we saw this year was a lot of games getting delayed, a lot of games not making it out the door. So I just wanted a scenario where, I can be excited for a game, even if it doesn't immediately come out next year. This is a new award for this year. I don't know if I'll give out this award next year. I guess it really depends on how many of those games I play, but we do have Best Horror Game, one of the only, I believe the only genre specific award that I have for you this year, and that's because I played a good number of horror games that were all pretty good in their own way, and they have made it into their own award category. We also have Most Disappointing Game, Best Surprise, Biggest News Story, Best Time Sync, Best Vibes, and I'll get into what vibes means later on, Worst Game, and then my top 5 ranked 2023 Game of the Year list. We're going to go from 5 to 1 for my favorite games, number 1 being the best game of this year. So let's go back now and start giving out some damn awards. What do you say? Let's give out the award for What's Old is New Again Game of the Year. This is for games that have been out. They did not come out in 2023, but have received a lot of love, a lot of updates, a lot of fixes, content additions, things like that. Games that still feel fresh and new in this year, despite them being older games. The nominees are Hitman World of Assassination. That is the Hitman trilogy. That's Hitman 1, 2, and 3 combined into a trilogy. Titanfall 2, and then we also have Cyberpunk 2077. The first thing I'm going to say is I'm going to talk about Titanfall 2 for a moment. Titanfall 2 is the oldest game on this list. It is also, I'm not going to say the best game on this list, but it is at worst, it is runner up on this category. We don't do ranked for this. We just have one definitive winner, but I just want to say that Titanfall 2 is a hell of a video game. It has an incredible single player story, campaign, and it also has some of the best multiplayer, first person rootin' tootin' shooting that you are going to find on the PS4 generation or even the PS5 generation today. Titanfall 2 is an incredible game. Now, the reason that it is making its way onto this list is that for the longest time, it kind of went ignored and broken. There was a lot of issues with the multiplayer that just kind of developed over a long period of time that has since been fixed and has been and basically brought new life to Titanfall 2. The Titanfall 2 at one point, the multiplayer was almost unplayable despite it being such an incredible game, just kind of left ignored, and a lot of security and vulnerability issues that were impacting the game, cheaters, hackers, that sort of thing, getting in the way of your ability to play the game. They have fixed that game, and even just the simple fixing of Titanfall 2, I think warrants it being on this list, because I played a little bit of Titanfall 2 this year, had an amazing time with that multiplayer, had not played that multiplayer in some time, but even my somewhat brief time with Titanfall 2 was amazing. Some of the most fun I had in a multiplayer shooter this year, despite it being a game from the PS4 generation. So shout out to Titanfall 2 for being one of the best old games of 2023, despite its age. It is really second to none in that regard. Let's take a moment now to talk about Hitman World of Assassination. One of the best things that IO could have done for that Hitman trilogy was package it up into one cohesive unit, one cohesive package, because it is definitely a game worth seeing through to the very end, from the very first level, from Paris in Hitman, all the way up to the train sequence in Hitman 3. Hitman World of Assassination is an incredible package and collection of some of the best stealth action, some of the most hilarious gameplay and mechanics and moments you are going to find just about anywhere. You could make an argument that maybe Hitman trilogy is like the best stealth action, game ever made. I don't know if I would go necessarily that far with it. I'm not here to name other better games, but I will just say that Hitman World of Assassination, just in terms of a cohesive package, is spectacular. For them to add the freelancer mode to this package makes it even better. So the freelancer mode, we talked about it very early on in the year. It is Hitman raw. It is Hitman without the context of any of the story. It is randomly generated. It is, you in the shit. It is the pure mechanical form of Hitman. So Hitman Freelancer mode is a mode where you are tasked with going through all of a majority of the levels from the original trilogy in a randomized order, where you are there to take out random targets placed within the map. So you are not going back to, story locations, main story locations from these levels and finding characters that you originally found. These are different characters placed in different parts of the level, and you are tasked with taking them out. And the idea being is that as you progress through these levels, you will have to do more and more levels to move on to the next stage of the challenge. And also, if you die twice, you have to restart everything. It's about, like, I want to say like 5 or 7 different stages that you need to go through of these different levels, getting progressively harder and harder, with the stakes getting higher and higher before you can finish off. Now, the way that it works is that basically each stage, I forget if it's 5 or 7 stages, please don't correct me on it. But every stage consists of, maybe 3 or 5 levels, something like that, right? So you're going to, I'm going to go through the Paris level. I'm going to go through Sapienza. I'm going to go through Tokyo. And then at the end, there's basically a boss battle, the Hitman's equivalent of a boss battle at the very end, where basically you don't know who your target is. You are given information about, your target in this level is wearing a white hat. They are smoking. They are wearing a watch on their left wrist and other, kind of characteristics. But the game has populated it with, half a dozen or so would-be targets that may meet some of the criteria for the target that you're looking for, but there's only one target that actually meets the criteria. Those bosses also tend to have lookouts, so people that can spot you a lot quicker, a lot easier, and from a lot further away, meaning that it's harder to get in close at your target to verify who the ID is of this person you're trying to kill. They also tend to have bodyguards that tend to be a lot faster on the draw in terms of shooting, tend to carry more powerful weapons. And as you go about this, you start to collect various items to help you along the way, right? You might start off the game, a run of the game with, a shotgun, but by the end you might have a silent submachine gun. So if something does get really messy, you might be able to take out a variety of enemies and targets without necessarily causing alarm. But again, the stakes get high. Like if you get through 3 stages and then you die, you will have to start all over again, which means that it is the hardest that Hitman has ever been, because it does not hold your hand in terms of, you could do this to this guy and you can go meet this person here and they'll give you a thing that allows you to trigger an explosion, halfway into the level or whatever the case may be. This is you and your wits and a couple of items that you have to kind of find in that world. And that's kind of about it. You can buy new weapons and things like, and weapons and items and stuff like that as the game progresses. But again, if the money that you earn during the missions is lost, you're kind of back to square one. So you really want to think both conservatively in terms of, I don't want to risk losing these items. I don't want to risk losing this money, but also, going bold and trying to kill your targets with as few items as possible so you don't lose them, trying to do some of the bonus objectives right, and things like that. And when you put that with the whole trilogy, it becomes a really special experience and one of my favorite old games from this year. And then our final nominee is Cyberpunk 2077. I am as shocked as you that I ended up enjoying Cyberpunk 2077 as much as I did. For a game that I went back to and tried to play multiple times and hated, well, hate's a strong word, but strongly disliked for a vast majority of my time with the game, I am as shocked as you that I liked Cyberpunk 2077 this year as much as I did, enough to finish the game. Unlike a game like Titanfall 2, where they only had to fix a couple of things to get that game, back into, top shape, there was a lot that needed to be done in order to make Cyberpunk 2077 an appealing game to me. I know there were plenty of people out there that enjoyed the game at launch, got through the game, without, too much trouble. For me, Cyberpunk always seemed like a hot mess, and for the longest time seemed like kind of an irredeemable mess on top of everything else. But lo and behold, with update 2.0, with, some changes to the graphics, like the ray tracing, the path tracing, and stuff like that, that all that stuff kind of coincided with the release of Phantom Liberty. While I didn't end up playing the Phantom Liberty expansion, I did start a new game of Cyberpunk 2077 and play through it to the very end. And wow, while it is not a game that it's not a game that I set out to dislike. A lot of things that Cyberpunk does, even from the surface, are things that I'm totally interested in. We have, kind of first person action RPG stuff. We got shooting. We got, urban crime, stealing cars type Grand Theft Auto stuff. We got hacking. We got stealth. We got loot. We got side quests. We got dialogue options. Like, on its face, Cyberpunk 2077 should have been a game that I liked out of the gate. But here we are 3 years later, and Cyberpunk 2077 is my What's Old is New Again Game of the Year winner. Congrats to Cyberpunk 2077. I am really, really impressed with what they did. I don't love the main story. I don't love some of the characters. But I also recognize that, they could only do so much to kind of fix that game, and going back and rewriting the whole story, going back and making Keanu Reeves's character a lot more likable, which I get it. He's supposed to be an asshole, but it's not like, I watch a lot of wrestling. Okay. I watch a lot of wrestling. I know a thing or two about likable assholes, about likable villains. Right. And I'm not saying that, Keanu Reeves needs to be on some Hulk Hogan NWO type shit, or be the Miz or something like that. But I just found his character to be a tad obnoxious, and his focus in the story kind of brings it down overall. But the part where it is one of the most gorgeous video games I have ever played, the part where I really feel like you were given a ton of options in terms of being your cyber badass. I spent a lot of time using air dash abilities. I'm jumping and double jumping and dodging and dashing through the air, and I'm, shooting, wicked fast with great accuracy, and using melee, abilities and all that stuff. Just a ton of fun. They really at least were able to salvage the mechanical gameplay fun of what makes Cyberpunk 2077 so great. So from that regard, like in terms of, just raw gameplay, I had an absolute blast, leveling up my character, being my own V, getting new weapons and upgrades and all of that stuff. Just a ton of fun. And I am super impressed with it. So congratulations to Cyberpunk 2077 for being my What's Old is New Again Game of the Year. We're going to move on to best 2023 game I didn't get a chance to play / game I wanted to get around to playing. We have 5 nominees in this category because there were a lot of great games that I did not get a chance to play this year. A ton of great games, such as Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. That is the expansion pass that they sold separately for Cyberpunk, featuring Idris Elba and a whole new story and a whole new world and all of that stuff. Sea of Stars, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 16, and Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2, I believe, one of my most anticipated games from last year. We're going to get into talking about all these games, and let's do it right now. Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty, I ended up liking that base game so much that I would be willing to go back and play through that expansion at some point in time. Maybe wait for it to go on sale, maybe a little bit cheaper. I don't necessarily want to recognize the game in terms of, oh, I know Cyberpunk 2077 was a shitty game at launch and they fixed it. Now you should go spend full price to get or whatever the cost that they're charging for the Phantom Liberty expansion is. Like, don't immediately go out and run out and buy that just because they fixed it. Like, you should still wait for that game to be on sale. You should not be rewarding their kind of, half-ass attempt at getting that game out the door and then, kind of turning around and fixing it. Like, Cyberpunk 2077 is a good game now. And Phantom Liberty is supposed to be the best kind of representation of that game, including all the free updates and additions that they added to the game. But for me, like, the idea of a new story, of a better story, of perhaps a more cohesive story and a better cast of characters is the thing that I wanted out of Cyberpunk 2077 originally. So if that's what they're offering with Phantom Liberty, sign me up. One of these days, I would love to play Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. Sea of Stars, I just last night when I'm recording this, I had finished up Persona 4 Golden. So there is this part of me that's on a bit of a JRPG type kick, looking at games coming out next year, like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, among with some other JRPGs. And Sea of Stars, from my understanding of Sea of Stars, is that it is a very beginner, kind of entry point for JRPGs. If you are not the biggest fan of JRPGs, if you are not experienced with JRPGs, Sea of Stars seems to be a great entry point. It is also available on both Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. It did launch day and date on PlayStation Plus and Game Pass, so there really is no excuse to check out Sea of Stars if you haven't already. I have it downloaded. I'm playing through another game right now. Once I'm done the game I'm currently playing, I will get around to playing Sea of Stars. So we will have a lot to say about Sea of Stars very, very soon. I just need to have the chance to play it, but it will not be happening in 2023. Baldur's Gate 3, the Game Awards winner for Game of the Year. A game that, similar to Sea of Stars, is not in a genre that I particularly, spend a lot of time with. Your kind of traditional CRPG or traditional RPGs. Just for those that know, JRPG, Japanese role-playing game, CRPG, computer role-playing game. And while those terms have been kind of, have mutated over the years, I would say that, in the case of Sea of Stars and Baldur's Gate, they are very much representative of that kind of subgenre of the RPG nature. And with Baldur's Gate 3, the thing that's kind of stopping me from getting around to it is that they are continuing to update and work on that game. They are continuing to update it and fix, little issues here and there with that game. The other thing that Larian Studios does is, if you go look up some of their past games, like Divinity Original Sin 2 and things like that, you'll notice if you go to here, I'm going to load up Steam here. I can load up the PlayStation Store. It doesn't really matter either way. We'll load up the PlayStation Store here because I just want to kind of point something out here. Basically, Larian will tell you when it is safe to finish those games. And I'm going to kind of give you an example of that. Oh, I can't spell Divinity. So if you go now to the PlayStation Store, you'll see Divinity Original Sin and Divinity Original Sin 2. And they have these tags on them that say Enhanced Edition and Definitive Edition. And basically, that is their way of saying, we are done updating the game. This is all of the content that we sold separately, all the updates that we will ever do to the game. It is in one complete package. And for a game like Baldur's Gate 3 or Divinity, for that matter, that is going to be some multi-100-hour experience. The likelihood that I'm going to play through Baldur's Gate 3 more than once is, assuming I finished it, if I started it, is very, very low. So for me, I'm going to wait until they do the definitive, final edition, whatever, of Baldur's Gate 3. I will buy that version of the game. I'm assuming that those who buy Baldur's Gate 3 will get it updated or upgraded for free, but I'm going to wait until they have finished working on that game, because I don't think I'm going to go back and check out some of the stuff that they have added upon finishing it. But it seems like the best game, one of the biggest games of 2023, and I'd be a fool if I didn't get a chance to play it at some point, hopefully next year. Final Fantasy 15 also announced some expansions and stuff for Final Fantasy 15 coming down the road later next year. A game that I am very interested in. I also had a chance to briefly play Final Fantasy 15. I was over at a friend's house. We were playing some games. Got the chance to check out Final Fantasy 15, the demo, and I was pretty blown away from what I saw graphically, gameplay wise. Story, it's hard to get an idea for, kind of where the story is going in a two-ish hour-ish, two-ish hour long demo. But I was quite impressed. I know that they're going to be putting that game out on PC eventually. Might be making its way to PC sometime in 2024, and I will be very excited to play it when it comes out. And then, of course, Spider-Man 2, a game that kind of got snubbed at the Game Awards, but a great game supposedly a great game nonetheless. I am, of course, a big fan of Spider-Man Miles Morales. I also did enjoy this Spider-Man game on PS4. But Spider-Man 2 seems like kind of the best one of those to date. Maybe a little bit longer than something like a Miles Morales. Maybe a little bit more in terms of content than something like Miles Morales. But for everything I've seen on the PS5, the graphics and the storytelling and kind of where they're going with Spider-Man and Miles Morales, very, very exciting stuff. I would love to get a chance to play that. Of course, like with Final Fantasy 15, that will eventually be making its way to PC. And when it does, I will be very, very excited to play it because it was one of my most anticipated games of 2023 from last year. I am going to say that the winner of best 2023 game I didn't get a chance to play / game I want to get around to playing is Spider-Man 2. Let's keep moving on. We are doing great. This category has no winners. There's no winners because they're all winners in this category. What we have is most anticipated game, in no particular order. And all of these games are winners in my eyes because honestly, to assume that one of these games is going to be better than the other and knowing nothing about them, it's kind of hard. It's kind of a crapshoot. So let's go ahead and do most anticipated game. We're going to go through the nominees and then we're going to talk about every single game on that list. Your nominees for most anticipated game, assuming these games come out in 2024, I don't know. Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, Helldivers 2, Thank Goodness You're Here, Skate, and Hades 2. Now, a couple things to note about this list. Only 2 of these games have, as of the time of this recording, confirmed release dates. Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, out really soon, January 18th, and then Helldivers 2 out February 8th. No release date for Thank Goodness You're Here, no release date for Skate. And in the case of Hades, when it comes out, it will be entering early access, meaning that it will not be the finished version of the game upon release. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I don't have a lot of interest in Ubisoft games these days, and it really, unfortunately, doesn't have a lot to do with the shitty dealings of Ubisoft. I would love to say, hey, this company seems gross, I don't want to support them. But the fact is that there are good people that work at Ubisoft, and those good people sometimes make good video games. And if I'm looking at, kind of the slate of Ubisoft games in general, as much as Star Wars Outlaws could be, the Han Solo simulation I've always wanted, it's been a long time since we had a good Prince of Persia game. I think combining Prince of Persia with kind of the exploration focused design of something like a Castlevania Symphony of the Night, of a Metroid, I think is a really smart idea. I think focusing on combat and abilities and exploration is just what I'm kind of looking for out of a Prince of Persia game. And on top of that, everything that they've shown so far looks fantastic. It's like one of the more cohesive games, the most consistent, and just kind of wrap your mind around, this is what you see is what you get, and what you are seeing looks really awesome compared to, kind of the messiness of stuff like, X Defiant and Skull and Bones and some of the other stuff that Ubisoft's making. This isn't me throwing a bone at Ubisoft being like, well, I'm going to give you this, kind of nominee sort of thing, because they're a zillion-dollar company. They're not sending me free copies of games to review and talk about and stuff like that. They're just a big company along with other ones. So I'm not trying to help them out here by giving this award to, giving this nominee, to Prince of Persia. I genuinely think Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown is a cool looking game. I'm excited that it's coming out so soon. I think it is a game that everyone should have on their radar from what I've seen so far, because between what they could do with the story in terms of, diving into that Prince of Persia lore and all the cool abilities and exploration and combat that they can present, I think Prince of Persia is one of my most anticipated games of 2024 and beyond, assuming it doesn't get, delayed. Helldivers 2, another game with a release date. I was never the biggest fan of Helldivers 1. I found it to be a really, for a top-down shooter, for a top-down sort of arcade-ish style dual joystick shooter, I thought Helldivers 2 was fucking hard. I don't mind the idea of shooting big alien bugs and leveling up my guns and my guy and getting better loot and all that stuff. But man, why was Helldivers 1 so hard? Now, I don't know if Helldivers 2 is going to be as hard as Helldivers 1, but them kind of leaning into the whole Starship Troopers, side of, oh, join the resistance and shoot big alien bugs. I'm like, yes, I would love to shoot some big alien bugs. Sign me up. But on top of that, them going from a top-down perspective to a third-person over the shooter's perspective, third-person over the shoulder perspective, I think is great. I think it really adds to the game. I think the scale and scope of these big alien bugs and monsters that you're shooting, I think, comes through a lot better. My only hope is that Helldivers 1, doesn't rub off on Helldivers 2 in terms of the difficulty. Helldivers 2 looks great. That's coming to PC and PS5 February 8th. Really looking forward to it. I hope, fingers crossed, that it is good. Thank goodness you're here. There's a trailer out for Thank Goodness You're Here. You should go watch it because I don't know how I can describe it other than it is a comedy adventure platformer game. This is what I suspect. I think you're going to be doing a lot of running around, jumping, talking to people, and then there's going to be a bunch of goofy slapstick comedy stuff that happens there. To be honest, after seeing one trailer of Thank Goodness You're Here, I was pretty much sold. I don't need to see any more of it. I'm there. Just give me the game and I will play it, and I want to see for myself what that is. If you go watch any trailer from this award category, maybe go check out Thank Goodness You're Here. It's a hard game to describe, but it looks really cool from everything I've seen so far. Skate, of course, long in development at this point. Who knows when it is going to come out, but it is coming out. They've been doing a lot of testing for that game, closer and closer to release. I'm very happy that we're getting a new Skate game, and I'm okay with the fact that it's going to be a free-to-play game on top of everything else, because even if it was a game that you had to pay for, I think they would probably fill that game with a bunch of additional purchases and microtransactions and all that stuff. So the fact that they're going to give you, assumingly, the base game for free, and then you buy, skateboards and t-shirts and jeans and Vans, shoes and all that stuff separate, I'm okay with, because I just want a new skate game that I can play on modern consoles and things like that on a modern PC. And I really hope that the good folks at EA come through with a skate game that not only lives up to the legacy, but also maybe is reflective of the skateboarding culture and the world that we live in, right? I'm not necessarily looking for them to, play the hits and go the nostalgia route like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered did. I would love to see a kind of a modern interpretation of the skate games in our modern world, and I hope that Skate can pull that off. Looking forward to it. Hades 2, like with Baldur's Gate 3, while I am really excited to play Hades 2, I would like to play it when it's done. When I finally got around to playing Hades originally, I had finished, I had started playing it when the final version of that game had come out. I did not play that game while in early access. It's not that I have nothing against early access. There were games this year that I played in early access. I think the problem is that because you're getting a slice of a game that gets updated and evolved over time, there's every possibility that you will forget about that game and you'll be like, oh, 6 months later, what have they done to this game? Oh, I don't really remember what this game was kind of about or what I'm doing or, what the story was. And maybe I should just start a new save and, carry on. Like Hades 1 is an incredible video game. It's one of the best, interpretations of Greek mythology that I have ever played in a game. It has some of the best action I've played in a long time. It's got some of the best rogue-like, kind of going on a run, similar to something like Hitman, World of Assassination. You are going on these runs to try to escape the underworld. And if you fail, you have to go back and start over, but you will have upgrades and you know, abilities that you didn't have the first time around, making every attempt escaping the underworld easier and easier. But on top of that, like, man, the story that they wrote for Hades 1, in terms of why you're trying to escape, and you know, the gods that you meet along the way and their presentation and all that stuff, it's just so good. And honestly, I wasn't expecting them to make a sequel to Hades. Of all things that they could have done, why take on such a tough task as trying to follow up Hades 1? That being said, if they've earned my trust when it comes to this, really looking forward to seeing Hades 2 eventually down the road. But I would like to see what the final version of the game is. I don't know if I necessarily need to go and play the early access version of the game when it comes out. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about best horror game, most disappointing, and best surprise. So stick around. We will be right back. All right, welcome back. Let's do it and talk about best horror game. Your nominees for best horror game are Dead Space Remake, the Resident Evil 4 Remake, and Alan Wake 2. Now, we have two remakes and a sequel. And I think each game has its own interpretation of what a horror game can be, right? In the case of Resident Evil 4, it is definitely, you know, it definitely goes down the road of being more of an action horror game, kind of a bombastic, you know, guns blazing, you know, the enemy. Listen, Resident Evil 4 is the only game on this list where you can suplex enemies. So there's that to consider in terms of how action and over the top Resident Evil 4 gets. In the case of Alan Wake 2, it is definitely going for that more psychological horror thriller type experience. And Dead Space Remake, on the other hand, tends to deal a lot more in dread, right? So your creepy dark hallways, your jump scare galores, you know, kind of the sudden shift, you know, like, and you know, an air vent will start rattling and making a bunch of noise, or some door will just open on its own, or a grate will fall from the ceiling, and all that stuff. Like, Dead Space deals a lot more in that sort of thing. And I think when I think about Alan Wake 2 is, well, actually, let's talk about Resident Evil 4 first. Resident Evil 4 is probably the least scary game on this list, and I think a lot of that has to deal with the fact that, you know, as the Resident Evil games went on, until they reset with Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil became more and more of an action thing as the years went on for it. And I think 4 is a big turning point for that. I think 3, the remake of 3 definitely deals a lot in, you know, action shooting over some of the horror elements. But I think 4, I can't stress enough, you can suplex the enemies in this game. What more do you want out of an action game? I mean, come on, man. But the point is that I like Resident Evil 4, don't get me wrong. We're going to talk about Resident Evil 4 later. But from a horror game perspective, I just don't think it is quite as scary as Alan Wake 2 or Dead Space. Now, while it doesn't need to necessarily be scary, you know, super duper uber scary to be best horror game, I think if there's one thing that, you know, Resident Evil 4, and this goes back to the original Resident Evil 4, not just the remake, it definitely leans more into the action movie, you know, with horror elements style experience over being a straight horror game. Alan Wake 2 is a fucking mind trip. Like, it is a real trip on top of the horror elements. You know, it really is fucking with your head from beginning to end in terms of what's really going on, the true nature of the characters. And I think in that regard, it maybe leans at times, it swings back and forth because there are jump scares in the game. There is some really creepy, dark, and kind of brutal depictions of violence and really just kind of gnarly subject matter throughout that game. And some genuinely, like, it also deals with like emotional trauma and and things like that as well, and just relatively dark subject matter. So much more of a horror game than maybe a true horror game, for lack of a better word, compared to something like Resident Evil 4, just in terms of subject matter and tone and things like that. But when I think about best horror game, the scariest game that I played, the game where every door opening sequence felt like a harrowing act, when I think about just walking down creepy hallways, best played with headphones, without a doubt, the best horror game that I played this year was Dead Space. Now, Dead Space is of course the remake of Dead Space. It's also a game that is a much newer game than something like Resident Evil 4, right? The reason why, Resident Evil 4 maybe got talked about a little bit more during some of the game awards and things like that is because it's a much older game. They did a lot more to it to modernize it. Whereas Dead Space, it's a scenario where 360 games are kind of still the standard for games that we play today on PS5. It's just that they're bigger with more microtransactions and all sorts of shit, right? But Dead Space, one of the cool things that they do with Dead Space is they kind of adjust the difficulty and the tension of the game based on how well you're doing. So if you got a lot of ammo, you might see a lot more enemies than you normally would in a combat encounter because they want you to be kind of just scraping by, right? Oh, I only got so many bullets for this plasma cutter. Oh, I'm running low on health and stuff like that. But when they're not fucking with you in terms of difficulty, really that sound design, the eeriness of that space horror, the sense of isolation is really second to none. And if you are looking for, more of a just creepy horror experience, I gotta give it to Dead Space for best horror game because it really does everything that I kind of want out of a horror game, while also still maintaining a decent amount of action, but doesn't necessarily reach those over the top levels of Resident Evil 4 and doesn't take such wild swings back and forth in terms of being a thriller, being a mind fuck, being a kind of a murder mystery, the way that Alan Wake 2 is. Most disappointing game. Your nominees for most disappointing game. Again, I wanted to shout out Dead Space for best horror game because I don't typically do a genre specific awards. Do not expect another best horror game award next year, but hey, maybe it'll happen. But I just want to clarify that before we move on. Most disappointing game. We got 3 games on this list for most disappointing. This might be the most controversial award category, but to hell with it. I'm sticking to my guns. Your nominees for most disappointing are Hogwarts Legacy, Destiny 2 Lightfall, and Cities Skylines 2. And I'm going to kick things off by talking about Cities Skylines 2. There was no need for Cities Skylines 2 to be the technical mess that it is, right? Like, one of the things that I said immediately out of the gate playing Cities Skylines 2 is that it doesn't do enough to justify its own existence, but because it's on Game Pass, I guess I'll just play it. But if you really sit down and think about what they have done with Cities Skylines 2, they have turned the art of building and managing your own city. They've mostly repainted over the original City Skylines with a slightly different flavor. And then on top of that, they made it a pretty bad looking game from a graphical standpoint, from a technical standpoint. It's just kind of a mess. Like, it runs pretty poorly, even on my, modest PC, for lack of a better word. It was so busted technically that they had to delay the console versions of that game. And don't get me wrong, I didn't mind my time with City Skylines, but it's a game that doesn't really justify itself in terms of new and improved updates and additions and changes. And then on top of that, technically, it's just a game that, on PC, I have to lower a lot of the settings on this PC to get it to run properly because it can't handle the way it renders the civilians, the way it renders the traffic and all of that stuff. When I say disappointing, like, it just didn't need to be like this. If they're going to fart out a game, fart out a sequel to City Skylines, maybe wait until there's something a little more substantial, because it just doesn't do enough new and improved. And the things that it does change just feel kind of sloppy and messy. Let's talk Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy is disappointing because it has so many good ideas. It does so much well in its first attempt that the things that it is lacking are incredibly glaring. Let's talk about the good things about Hogwarts Legacy. Their depiction of the wizarding world and all of Hogwarts and its surrounding areas, its towns and its forests and all that stuff, incredibly well rendered. There is, honestly, from an open world experience and just feeling like you're in a living, breathing, well represented world, there is nothing quite like, walking through the Hogwarts school, exploring the grounds, exploring the individual hallways and towers and stuff like that. Like, the part where you are wandering around this Hogwarts open world and, again, the surrounding areas of it is really fucking cool. I think graphically it's okay. It runs not great on PC. It kind of runs not amazing on PC. Similar to City Skylines, despite having an okay powerful PC, I had to lower a couple of settings just to get it to run well. So that was kind of disappointing. I feel like that kind of takes away from, kind of being in that world and seeing that space and all of that stuff, unfortunately. But the world of Hogwarts Legacy, they got down pretty well. The character creator is not bad as well, in terms of you feeling like you are this character in this world of Hogwarts and you being your own wizard, I think is really neat. I think the combat is kind of cool. The way that it is so chaotic and you're just, constantly yelling. Basically your character is constantly yelling out these random spells as you pull guys towards you, fling them across the room, and then set them on fire, and then, throw them around and all of that stuff. The way that the kind of combat, spells play off of one another to create this really dynamic. It almost at times feels like you're playing like something like a Devil May Cry, in terms of the way you're throwing enemies in the air and juggling them and all of that stuff. Like, it's super cool the way the combat works. Unfortunately, I think that's kind of where Hogwarts Legacy starts to fall apart. Is everything that I just mentioned is great. I think everything else that I'm about to talk about is maybe not so great. So it's a big, beautiful open world. And other than walking around and looking at things, I think what you do in that game is not very exciting. I think the story is pretty lackluster. I understand that, we're dealing with, Hogwarts hundreds of years ago, pre-Harry Potter and all that stuff. I'm not necessarily, I need to be like the boy wizard or any of that stuff, the boy who lived or any of that stuff. But good God, man. I understand that, like, every video game I'm going to try my best not to spoil anything. So if you've gotten this far into the show, don't worry. I'm going to try my very best to not spoil anything. But the part where you are the chosen one, you are the chosen wizard to solve this problem, to save the day, is just not that interesting. I feel like it really is really lacking in terms of not only the kind of the main plot line, but I think some of the characters are okay. They just don't have a lot to work with. Like, your side quests of like, oh, I made a friend, he's in Slytherin and we have this going on and his sister is sick and all of this stuff. Like, a lot of that stuff just doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere. And also the fact that the main story is kind of blocked by you having to engage with a lot of this side content that doesn't feel that great. Like, it'd be one thing if it's like, oh, you're a student we need to wait for time to pass. So go hang out with your friends, or go, talk to these other people before we can move on to the next main plot point. I think it would make a lot of sense if what I did when I got there was very exciting. I think the other thing is that the side content, talking to some of the townspeople and being like, I have a problem with goblins, or I'm trying to be the best broom rider, or we're running an underground fight club at the school. Like, the side content here and there isn't very exciting either. The collectibles are I don't find particularly rewarding. I think the way that the game keeps track of your progress, I think, is really smart. But the problem is that I finished that game, I got to the ending, and then the main character, or the main character, is basically forced to go do the rest of the side content that they didn't finish in order to get the true ending of the game. And I'm like, man, the credits just rolled on this game. I just finished this game, and you're telling me that all the side content that I skipped is hiding the real ending to this game? So at that point, I had just turned the game off. I was like, I'm not going to go and finish up all of the side content that I skipped. That was kind of boring, kind of tedious, kind of shallow, just to see the main ending to a story that I didn't find particularly interesting in the first place. I think there's a ton of potential to build on Hogwarts Legacy 2 and make it a really fantastic game if they can just stick to a more, interesting story, and perhaps more interesting side content, meaningful side content next time around. And without a doubt, the winner, I'm just going to say it right now, the winner of this category is Destiny 2 Lightfall. Holy shit, Destiny 2 has had a rough year. And it isn't just Lightfall, but I think Lightfall might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. Lightfall was a pretty hyped game prior to release, and while I'm not necessarily saying, I can't believe they tricked me into being excited for a video game, the fact is that, like, Destiny 2 Lightfall really doesn't build upon anything that was great about the last couple of expansions for Destiny, right? I don't think it builds upon what made the Witch Queen great or any of that stuff. It's a real mess. It's a real mess. I think that story is pretty half-assed, and honestly, at times the writing is just bad. It's not just that it's boring or mediocre or something. It's just kind of annoying. Some of the writing, some of the characters, and some of the dialogue in Destiny 2 is just straight up annoying. And I didn't need to be this way. Like, they've done good stories. They've done good dialogue and interesting plot points and subplots and all of this stuff. Destiny 2 didn't need to be like that. And on top of everything else, the presentation of that world makes it pretty obvious that, they maybe have run out of ideas to keep the gameplay and updates fresh and exciting for Destiny 2. I really felt like I was going through the motions on a lot of the stuff as I played through Lightfall. And on top of that, the new stuff that they added isn't very great. Like the strand ability, your green, like, zipline ability and all that stuff. It's fucking boring. It's just boring. The world that they added, that neon soaked world, is not very exciting to play through. And then on top of that, all of the stuff that they've added to Destiny 2 since Lightfall came out has been so unappealing that it's turned away a large part of its audience. To make matters worse, Bungie has come across as such an awful company in terms of treating its own people, that why would I go and play this mediocre game just to support a company that seems pretty shitty in the first place? This is not, I'm going to separate the art from the artist. I promise. Just bear with me here, right? If you play Destiny 2 because you believe in the cause that is Bungie, there is no cause worth believing in. And if you play Destiny 2 because you enjoyed the game has gotten a lot worse since Lightfall came out in the first place. So really, like, Destiny 2 top to bottom is a disappointment, and there's no other way of putting it. But I will give the award to Destiny 2 Lightfall specifically because for additional content, it really doesn't do what I was looking for out of, a follow-up to the Witch Queen story. Gameplay-wise, it's pretty half-baked. And writing-wise, it's just bad. It's just the dialogue stinks. The characters are annoying. It's just a cliched, stupid mess. Destiny 2 Lightfall almost feels like a parody of itself, which is not what I would have expected coming out of playing Destiny 2 The Witch Queen. So congratulations to Destiny 2, most disappointing game of 2023. Best Surprise. The nominees for Best Surprise, well, first of all, let's just say Best Surprise really is, games that I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did, or games that really kind of blew me away in some way, shape, or form. This isn't best game. This is just, whoa, I didn't expect to like get into this, or I didn't expect this to be as good as it was, or I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. Things like that, right? Your nominees for Best Surprise are Alan Wake 2, El Paso Elsewhere, and the Hitman Freelancer mode. Let's just talk about Hitman Freelancer mode. One of the things that I really enjoyed about Hitman, the original World of Assassination, kind of trilogy, was the story, and was that they had written so many different ways of killing your story targets using a variety of, kind of in-story contextual, things, right? Like, oh, in Paris, you can trigger the fireworks to go off early in the party. Your main target comes out onto the balcony, he's all pissed off that the fireworks are happening, and you can snipe him, or you can, drop a speaker on one of the target's head. And again, I'm kind of picking on Paris, but you can drop a speaker on the target's head while he's making a speech at the Paris, party. Or, oh, you can, shoot the virus, or you can, cause the virus to blow up, parts of Sapienza and all of that stuff. Like, one of the coolest things in one of the coolest story moments in Hitman is in Hokkaido, the Japan mission. It is a big, crazy, like, fancy hospital, and your target is already on the surgery operating table being operated on by robots. One of the things that you can do is you can hack the robotic arm to basically stab him to death, your main target, to stab him to death on the operating table, but he's in there for heart surgery. If you go find the heart that is in that, like, surgery facility, you can just basically toss the heart into the garbage can and effectively kill your target without ever actually seeing him. Like, the story stuff that they added, the story stuff that they do in Hitman, the main story mode, is amazing. It's hilarious. But if you tell me that you're going to strip away all that story stuff, and you're just going to put me and some raw ass Hitman scenarios without the story context, and just let me kind of run free and be my own creative assassin, I'm going to tell you that Hitman Freelancer mode is a huge surprise in that regard, because it works so well. Like, stripping away Hitman to just the bare essentials of your target, your location, and your equipment. Go do whatever you got to do get the job done. It is fucking raw. It is so cool. It feels so much more intense and exciting than some of the story stuff. So I was really blown away that they could somehow, kind of break Hitman down and build it back up with this free Freelancer mode update, and make it one of the most surprising experiences that I had in 2023. Alan Wake 2 is a surprise because it sticks the landing of everything that Remedy has been working towards up until now. Alan Wake 2 is not only a fantastic follow-up to Alan Wake 1, but it does a lot and pulls off a lot, connecting the Alan Wake storyline and universe with the Control universe. But it's also an incredibly, kind of effective, kind of celebration of things like Max Payne. This isn't a spoiler, but in Alan Wake 2, you play as two characters. You play as Alan Wake and you play as Saga Anderson. Saga Anderson is an FBI detective sent to the Bright Falls area to investigate some ritualistic murders that have been happening. You're an FBI agent, and your partner, and you have a partner with you. Your partner is voiced by James McCaffrey, the voice of Max Payne, and the character model is modeled after Sam Lake, the creative director over at Remedy. So basically, your partner is Max Payne. Your FBI partner is Max Payne. His name isn't Max Payne, but he has the voice of Max Payne, and he has the face of Max Payne, because if you don't remember, Sam Lake was the character model for Max Payne 1 and 2. And it is weird, and I'm not going to tell you whether they explain why it is the way it is, or why he sounds like Max Payne, looks like Max Payne, but is called a different character. Oh, and I should mention your FBI partner, his name is Alex Casey. Alex Casey is the name of the main protagonist in Alan Wake's murder mystery detective books. So all sorts of shit is just weird and just unexplained for the longest time. But the beautiful thing is that Alan Wake 2 pulls almost all of that stuff off. All the questions that you had by the time Alan Wake 1 was done, but all the questions you had about, what's going on with the Federal Bureau of Control, why are they covering this stuff up, why is this like this, like that stuff is answered pretty effectively throughout Alan Wake 2. And the reason why it's such a surprise to me is the fact that they can stick the landing on so much of the stuff that they had promised, even going back to Max Payne 1, right? Like the fact that like Alan Wake 2 somehow finds a way to like make effective references to Max Payne is so crazy. But on top of that, Alan Wake 2 is a much scarier game. It is a much darker game, and it is a much more faithful game in the, kind of survival horror, genre of games. And as such, I liked it a lot more than I did Control. I liked it a lot more than the original Alan Wake, right? Even though in, Control, you got all your crazy, powers, and you're shooting these crazy interdimensional beings and all of this stuff. And you're exploring this really, interesting, headquarters for the Federal Bureau of Control. The fact is, I just enjoyed playing Alan Wake 2 a lot more than I did Control or the original Alan Wake. So it surprised me from a gameplay perspective in terms of just how engaging that gameplay is. It surprised me in terms of, the storytelling and how it manages to kind of stick the landing. And Alan Wake 2 is just a fantastic game. We're going to talk about Alan Wake 2 as we continue on. But Alan Wake, one of my best surprises for 2023. But without a doubt, it's El Paso Elsewhere. El Paso Elsewhere, also kind of a love letter to Remedy and Max Payne and all of that stuff, but it has so much more of its own unique identity. It has so much more flair to it. It has so many interesting interpretations of what a, kind of a painkiller addicted, madman with two pistols jumping backwards, shooting guns in slow motion. Like it just has its own really fun interpretations of what that type of game can be, what type of story it can tell, and what type of characters and subject matter. Like, I'm surprised that I liked a game that was basically El Paso Elsewhere is basically a breakup game. It is basically a game about a failed relationship falling apart, and you seeing kind of the aftermath of that right before your eyes. And what surprises me is just how effective and touching that story can be, as far as a breakup game can be. But on top of that, the voice acting is incredible. I'm going to say that like El Paso Elsewhere probably has the best voice acting in any game I played this year. It has some of the best music that I've seen heard this year. El Paso Elsewhere just kind of knocked me on my ass for just how well it interprets, kind of the Max Payne style shooting with a vampire story, with a romantic story, and also the weird trippy visuals and music that game has. Like, El Paso Elsewhere is a huge surprise for me. I was looking forward to the game, but I'm surprised just how well it manages to have such a strong identity while also being such a faithful love letter to a lot of stuff that it wears on its sleeve. So congratulations to El Paso Elsewhere, Best Surprise 2023. All right, we are going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to do biggest news story, best time sync, best vibes, and worst game. So stick around. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show. Biggest news story 2023. Your nominees are Embracer Group. That's it, just Embracer Group. Microsoft buying Activision, and Unity. Of course, when I say Unity, I'm talking about Unity's controversial pricing policy changes that have potentially ruined the company. We will see. Where do we begin? Let's talk Unity. Unity, of course, one of the most popular engines and tool sets out there for developers to make games with, especially as it relates to independent games. And Unity has kind of been experiencing a identity crisis for some time as they find new ways to make money off of the way they support their product, the way that the product is used to develop games, the way it's sold and monetized. Like, they have definitely had a rough go at it in terms of trying to figure out how to make what was, and probably still is, one of the most popular tool sets out there for developers. But the installation fee that they had, implemented, and I guess have gone back and forth on to some extent, them charging developers just for people to install their games is fucking lunacy, right? It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for the free to play market, right? Because you want to get people in the door and spending money on microtransactions, on cards, on updates, on gems, on whatever. You just want to get people in the door playing your game, right? But when it's a $15, $10 indie game on PlayStation or Steam or something like that, they're losing so much of the only sales they're going to get on a game, assuming they don't do, additional content sold separately, that it really felt like kneecapping a big part of Unity's audience, which was indie developers that are making games for sale on platforms like Steam and PlayStation. A real boneheaded move that has eroded almost all trust that developers have for Unity. And it is really unfortunate to see it kind of go this way. Not the biggest news story of the year, because I don't think it is over just yet, and we'll see how it goes for Unity in 2024. Well, I mean, hey, if they make it to 2025, fucking good on them. I'm talking about 2024. Embracer Group. A great example of what happens when, kind of unchecked capitalism begins to absorb all of the small and medium sized companies in its industry, but doesn't actually have the resources to support their recent purchases. So Embracer Group had its big deal with Saudi Arabia. It's like multi-billion-dollar deal with Saudi Arabia go belly up. And as a result, all of the money that Embracer Group was planning on using to support studios that it had purchased, IPs that it had purchased, companies that it had purchased, and the games that it planned on developing were not going to happen because it didn't have the money. Now you might be thinking, well, why would they spend all this time and money buying up, Borderlands developer Gearbox and Crystal Dynamics and all of these companies? Why would they do this? It's because they were writing blank checks that they weren't worried about cashing. But unfortunately, at some point you gotta pay up for what you've been buying, right? At some point you're at that restaurant, that bill's gonna come to you, and you're gonna be like, why did I eat all this food? And that's exactly what has happened with Embracer Group. They spent more money than they had. They made promises they couldn't keep. And the real unfortunate part is that it didn't need to be like this. If they had been a lot more conservative about the studios they were buying, the acquisitions they were making, we might be in a scenario where we have a much bigger, middle tier, kind of B tier, single A tier developer, network of studios that were making, kind of B to A, tier games, right? I think about the people that are making Alone in the Dark, right? And I'm not picking on Alone in the Dark. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm not saying it's a B game, a C game, a D, whatever. I'm just saying that, like, you can clearly look at Alone in the Dark and be like, this game does not have the same budget, does not have the same resources, does not have the same team and development cycle of something like a Dead Space, of something like an Alan Wake 2, of something like a Resident Evil 4 remake, right? But what I'm saying is Embracer Group buying up and then killing off companies like the people that are making Alone in the Dark. Alone in the Dark has not been canceled. Alone in the Dark developer, as far as we know, is fine, despite being an Embracer Group studio. Means that we're going to see a lot less of those, tier of games. And in a world where 2023 showed us that people are really interested in playing a wide variety of games, we could have seen scenarios where, B and A, single A tier games grow to have a big audience or a sustainable niche crowd and things like that. But Embracer Group going up and buying all these companies just to kill them means that we're going to be dealing with a world where we have a lot more indie games, a lot more small scale games, and we have AAA big budget. Spider-Man 2 cost $300 million for Sony to make, right? We can't have a scenario where the only games that are being made are the $300 million games and the sub $1 million games. We need to have something in between, and Embracer Group has effectively destroyed that for the time being. But it is not the biggest news story of the year. Microsoft buying Activision, $69 billion. There is no other news story this year that had so many twists and turns and eventual, conclusion the way that Microsoft buying Activision did. Now, the thing is, the reason why I'm giving biggest news story to Microsoft buying Activision is it could very easily turn into an Embracer Group style situation, right? Imagine a scenario where Microsoft's, just consolidated with Activision, these big companies coming together, and then they squeeze out all their smaller developers, right? They squeeze out all that smaller IP, the properties and titles that they own. They start gutting Activision left, right, and center until there's nothing left, or Blizzard for that matter, right? I'm not saying that Microsoft bought Activision just to gut them, or are in a situation where they are more likely to gut them if something goes wrong, the way Embracer Group gutted its studios. But this is the rich getting richer. This is, big companies merging with big companies to become massive conglomerates, right? And Microsoft was already a pretty big company to begin with. And Activision, no small potato. However, they had become, kind of a shell of their former self by just investing in nothing but Call of Duty every year. They weren't making other new games. Blizzard was shitting the bed left, right, and center when it came to the games that they were producing. Like, Activision was on some pretty thin ice as a big company goes. Microsoft buying them could be the best thing to happen to Activision, right? Blizzard could really start to turn it around. Call of Duty could be as hot as hell. Maybe this time next year, with Microsoft support, I don't know, right? But there's a lot of questions left unanswered that might take years to come to light, right? We don't know if Microsoft is serious about Blizzard's next projects. We don't know if the team that made Call of Duty are going to just make Halo for the rest of their lives. Like, we don't know what is going to happen with Microsoft buying Activision, but it is a pretty big deal nonetheless. And that's why biggest news story goes to Microsoft buying Activision. Best time sink. This is for games that just took up way too much of my time, for better or for worse. Games that just I could go back to and play for hours and hours and hours. Whether that be because they were, constantly getting updates, or because of just how deep a lot of the mechanics and gameplay is for what is there. Time Sink, a game that, like, man, I just kept chipping away at it and I'm still not done. I'm still got a whole lot of this game left to play. There's a lot to this game. They're adding more all the time. Best time sink. Your nominees are Diablo 4, Forza Motorsport, and a Hitman Freelancer mode. Diablo 4 does have a story that has an ending to it, right? You can play as one character, play through that story mode, and be done with it, right? But between all of the seasonal updates that they've been doing to the game, all the changes that they've done, and the fact that it is going to take you longer than the main story to maximize, to get your character to the maximum power level, means that there is a lot more to Diablo 4 than maybe on its initial surface. Now, whether you think the gameplay itself is shallow or not, I'm going to leave that up to you. I really enjoyed my time with Diablo 4 despite some of Diablo 4's shortcomings. And it is a game that if I went back to in 6 months would probably take up, if I came back to Diablo 4 now, I could probably put 100, 200 hours into it, no sweat. If I went back to it in 6 months, I could probably do the same thing. Like, they're going to continue to add to Diablo 4, but I put a lot of time into Diablo 4 as it is. Maybe not as much time as other games this year, but I put a decent amount of time into Diablo. Let me see if I can pull up my time here. Not counting things like, the beta that I played earlier this year and stuff like that. I ended up putting about over 100 hours into Diablo 4 this year. Definitely over 100 hours. A game that I really enjoyed. And again, that's 100 hours, not counting the the betas and the alphas that I played. But also, despite putting 100 hours into it, there's still a lot more for me to do, a lot more for me to play. And if I wanted to jump back into it, I could probably put easily another 100 hours into that game. Forza Motorsport. Forza Motorsport doesn't actually have that much content. Like, there's not a lot of tracks. There's not a lot of different game modes to play. It is really the career mode, free race, time attack challenges against your ghost opponents, and the multiplayer. And I didn't even touch the multiplayer. But the time sink for me when it comes to Forza Motorsport really is leveling up those cars, right? Just racing that car, picking your car and racing it in multiple different tracks, leveling it up until you can get some better tires, get a better exhaust, maybe put a new spoiler or a hood or a rear wing or skirts or whatever on the car, and feeling that car going from a basic Honda Civic to what you could actually potentially see in a real racing scenario, right? A car that was maybe best equipped to deliver pizzas, but is now, ripping through some of these racetracks in record time. It is a lot of fun to grind and level up that car. There again, it's a scenario where you got to be committed to racing these cars on the same tracks over and over again. But I found myself, I leveled up one car to maximum. I'm close to leveling up a second car to maximum level, and I have a variety of cars that could at any point become my favorite car to drive as I continue to race with it and level it up. Forza Motorsport has its shortcomings. Again, a little lean on content, but there are a lot of cars for you to drive and race and level up. And I think the core component of that, kind of progression loop makes it one of the best time sinks of 2023. And then our final nominee, Hitman Freelancer mode. Hitman Freelancer mode is a game that I never actually finished that Hitman Freelancer mode because I was never good enough to beat all of the stages to beat that mode. But that didn't stop me from trying, brother. That did not stop me from going over and over again. Oh, I gotta, maybe if I brought in this, I have a silenced shotgun. Maybe I need a silenced shotgun for this level. Or, oh, maybe if I went more explosives heavy, or maybe I just need to bring a knife. Can I just get through this entire level with a single knife, or maybe just with explosions or distractions? Like, my mind was always racing, thinking of new ways to approach the randomized levels in Hitman Freelancer mode. And despite it being very difficult, I had a lot of fun with it, and I would go back to it in a heartbeat as well. And finally try to complete, similar to something like Diablo 4. Like, I haven't done everything there is to do in same with Forza for that matter. I haven't done everything there is I need to do, but I will definitely be chipping away at it for quite some time, probably well into 2024. Assuming I get lucky and can finally beat, the stars align and I can finally beat Hitman Freelancer mode or something like that. It's a fucking cool mode. It is addictive, and I don't like to use that term, but it is addictive, unlike the other modes in Hitman. And best time sync is going to Hitman Freelancer mode. All right, best vibes. Best vibes. Now, best vibes, I mean, just to clarify what best vibes means, it is a combination of tone, graphics, music. It's not just most interesting world, it's most cohesive identity. It is the most, kind of interesting, it is most striking identity. It is most confident, presentation. It is best vibes. It's not just best graphics. It's not just best music. It is the most cohesive and interesting package. Your nominees for best vibes are Alan Wake 2, El Paso Elsewhere, and Hogwarts Legacy. And I'm going to say Hogwarts Legacy right out of the gate. The best parts about that game are the world that they made. Again, it's a scenario where, running around Hogwarts is just a cool thing, right? I'm not even the biggest Harry Potter guy, and I loved going in and seeing, oh, this is the, the garden where all these crazy pumpkins are, these talking, monster pumpkins are, or, oh, this is the pitch where they play Quidditch, or, oh, this is the haunted forest where the unicorns and the centaurs are, or, oh, this is the Diagon Alley. This is the town where you can go to the bank, or you can, go buy yourself a wand, or, get some new clothes, or upgrade your broomstick, and just, oh, I can buy potions, or I can, oh, look at all these crazy, creatures that I can capture and kind of create my own garden of creatures and all of that stuff. Like, the world is super cool. It is a world well worth seeing. I also think the as you go through the school year, as it changes from Halloween to Christmas, like, that seasonal change looks really, really beautiful. You really get a sense that, wow, it's Christmas time in Hogwarts. Wow, it's Halloween in Hogwarts, and stuff like that. Really awesome stuff. I think the music is all right as well. Pretty effective at being kind of a Harry Potter, kind of reminds you of that Harry. I mean, listen, they literally have some of the exact music from the movies in the game. So I guess they knew what they were doing when they're like, no, we need to put like the theme from Harry Potter in this. It only makes sense. And I think it works. At no point does it feel cheap or feel like an imitation of the movies or of the books. Like, Hogwarts Legacy has, if nothing else, it is the best thing about Hogwarts Legacy is the vibes, is that world, top to bottom. And that's why it is a nominee on this award category. Alan Wake 2. Whew. I don't know if Alan Wake 2 is best vibes. It might be most vibes. Alan Wake 2 is so fucking trippy. Alan Wake 2 has some incredible music. I don't want to tell you to go listen to the music in Alan Wake 2 because it might potentially spoil the game, but the way that Alan Wake 2 has this like hard rock, power metal, soundtrack, through meaningful story moments in the game. The graphics, the ray tracing, the lighting looks absolutely incredible in Alan Wake 2. But the way that Alan Wake 2 can kind of go back and forth between being very creepy, real world scenarios of like, yo, this guy just got fucking stabbed to death in the forest. This is crazy. To, oh my God, now we're having like a musical, like there's a couple of different musical moments in Alan Wake 2, but it all fits. Like the part where the musical moments kick in make absolute sense and are cohesive, despite maybe a few moments ago, the world was changing and mutating around you because reality is being twisted and turned by elements of the story. The other thing that Alan Wake 2 does is it has a lot of FMV. They shot a lot of real video footage using the real actors from the game. There is a part in Alan Wake 2 where you're in a movie theater and you can just watch a 7-minute movie, like a 7-minute movie that they made that is in reference to some of the characters and stories of that game. But on top of that, there are times when you're walking through the world of Alan Wake 2 and they've actually kind of injected and imposed the video footage that they shot onto the world. So there's a moment where you're walking down this like creepy hallway and you see one of the characters from the game, opening the doorway that you're getting to and walking towards you. But that character is actually the video footage that they shot. And because the graphics are so high fidelity and so high resolution, there are times when it is really, really blurring the lines between, is this real video game footage or is this the video that they shot? Is it the in-game, graphics, or is this the video footage that they shot? A real kind of mind-melting experience, mixing up the graphics with the music, with the video footage that they shot. It is fucking rad. On top of that, there is a mechanic in the game when you play as Alan Wake where it's called the Writer's Room. And in different levels throughout Alan Wake's story campaign, you can enter a room and you can actually rewrite the story from that level to change the way areas of the level look. So an example is you're in this movie theater, and in the movie theater you can change it to be, oh, this cult has taken over this movie theater, and it'll change and it'll look like the headquarters of, certain elements of the room will look like this cult has taken over this movie theater. Or you can be like, oh, this is actually a murder scene, and then be like, oh, now there's blood all over the walls and all of this stuff. And it really changes the way the levels look. And it's a really brilliant mechanic because Alan Wake is often trying to write his way out of the troubles that he faces, right? As a writer, he is trying to write, oh, if I just change the story like this, if I just do this, maybe we can get out of this situation. We can save the day. We can fix the problem, whatever. Alan Wake 2 is an incredible video game with some of the best vibes of 2023, but it doesn't have the best vibes. That winner is El Paso Elsewhere. El Paso Elsewhere does a lot of the same stuff that Alan Wake 2 does. It just is so weird and so ballsy. Like the Alan Wake 2 is a very confident game, don't get me wrong, but El Paso Elsewhere is like out there, man. It is even crazier in what it attempts to do and how effectively it pulls it off than something like Alan Wake 2. I'll give you an example. In El Paso Elsewhere, you play as James Savage, who is a painkiller addicted, man on a mission shooting guns like a lunatic. He is voiced by one of the main developers on that game, and that main developer gives an incredible performance for the voice acting. But on top of that, the game features a mix of rap and alternative rock and electronica, kind of soundtrack to it. Sometimes on that soundtrack, you get rapping on, the rap song on the soundtrack. The rapping is done by the guy who voices James Savage in the game. So all of a sudden you're hearing this guy rap. He sounds like the main protagonist. He's often rapping about stuff that's kind of happening in that level at the moment. And it just feels like unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. It really felt like, oh, is the main character like secretly a rapper and they're just not talking about it? Is the character writing songs about what he's been experiencing and what he has going on? On top of that, the music is real out there and weird, and it's really enjoyable, both in the context of the game, but I also think if you listen to it on its own, you'd be like, yeah, these songs are pretty cool. This is some decent rapping. This is some cool, alternative rock and electronica and stuff like that. It is really, really neat. But the way that they mix that weird kind of fourth wall breaking, musical soundtrack with incredibly touching and effective voice acting, not just from the main character James Savage, but also Dracula, the ex-girlfriend who broke up with James Savage and is now trying to destroy the world in her quest to become the vampire lord. The chemistry between those two, both when you meet them, when they meet face to face post breakup, but also the audio logs and the cutscenes that you see with them during their relationship, as it's good, as it's bad, as it's breaking up. It's just, you really feel for those characters. You really feel that this is a real relationship with real problems and real love throughout their time together. It is really great in terms of the way that it kind of brings those characters together and makes them such standout individuals. The other thing I'll say is that mixing Max Payne style shooting with vampires and werewolves and witches and ghosts and demonic knights and all of this stuff works out way better than it has any right to. I could imagine a scenario where it's like, oh, shooting werewolves and vampires maybe isn't as fun as I would have thought. But it works out really, really well. Graphically, the game is super gorgeous looking, but not from like a technical standpoint, but from like a stylistic standpoint. On its face, El Paso Elsewhere kind of has the graphical resolution of like a PS1 game, but it's a PS1 game set against very modern special effects. When I say special effects, I mean like the lighting is really realistic. Maybe not as realistic as something like an Alan Wake 2, but the lighting is very modern looking. The particle effects are really good. The shadows are really good, but it is, but it is really good while also having kind of a lower resolution, kind of a grimier look to it. El Paso Elsewhere is all vibes. As far as I'm concerned, every last bit of that game is just pure vibes and something that I couldn't take my eyes and ears off of. And that's why El Paso Elsewhere wins my Best Vibes Award for 2023. Let's do one more. How about we do one more and then we'll take another break? What do you say? I'm getting word from my producer that we'll do one more and then we'll take a break. Worst game. Now, I didn't play all of the worst games of 2023. Now, some people are going to be like, oh, this category doesn't make sense because he didn't play Gollum. He didn't play, Kong, Skull Island, whatever the fuck that King Kong game is called. He didn't even play the day before. How can he say that these are some of the worst games he's played if he hasn't even played all of the worst games of 2023? And I'll tell you why. I don't go out of my way to play bad video games, right? I'm not here being like, I'm not a masochist. I'm not being like, oh man, I just want to see some of the worst shit possible from this year. In fact, I'm trying to play good games. And if I'm not going to play good games from 2023 or this year, I'm going to go back to my backlog and play good games that I've missed out on, right? I'm not coming out here and being like, I want to see the worst shit. So in a way, this worst game category is actually kind of special because these are games that didn't need to be bad. They didn't need to be as bad as they were and still somehow managed to make their way to me as some of the worst games that I've played. I didn't set out to necessarily want to hate these games. I didn't set out to expect them to be bad. And in fact, all of these games that could have been good. We have 3 nominees. One of those nominees is a winner for worst game. Your nominees are The Crew Motorfest, Atomic Heart, and Redfall. Worst game. The Crew Motorfest is not going to win this. One of the reasons why is because it's not the worst crew game. The worst crew game is definitely The Crew 2. But the Crew Motorfest, while taking inspiration from stuff like Forza Horizon 5, really doesn't understand why a game like Forza Horizon 5 would be such a popular and well-regarded open world racing game. One of the biggest problems I have with the Crew Motorfest is that it doesn't really justify itself being an open world racing game. My time spent with the game, I was playing as cars that I didn't actually have unlocked, meaning that when I finished a race, I was dumped back to the open world with a car that I owned that was not the same car that I drove the race in, with upgrades and unlocks that were for a car that I couldn't actually use in the next race because, oh, this race is now the vintage racer. So you're going to be driving this, Jaguar, or, oh, this next race is an open world race. And so you have like a Formula 1 type car. Sorry, your Audi, i8 does not qualify for this type of race. But if you win the race, we'll make your Audi i8 better. So you have a scenario where the cars don't really seem to align with the challenges and goals and objectives throughout a large part of the race. And as a result, why would I spend a bunch of time driving around this open world with a car that I'm not actually going to be using when I get to the race? The Crew Motorfest is a game that probably would have been better off not being open world. Just pick your race off the list and away you go. Right? And on top of that, it is rotten with microtransactions and additional purchases. But why would I spend real money unlocking cars that don't seem to actually make a difference to the game that I'm playing? Because I'm not going to be taking a lot of these cars into some of these races. Therefore, what is the point? I guess my thing with the Crew is I just threw my hands in the air and I said, what is the point of this game if it doesn't effectively convey a strong sense of open world, racing and exploration? It doesn't have a cohesive unlock and progression progress. And it is undermining itself at every possible turn by trying to sell you additional cars and bullshit that you just don't need. You just don't need it. Maybe the Crew Motorfest gets great 50 hours in. I have no idea. Maybe at some point, all the cars that you've unlocked and upgraded, you can apply to a wide variety of races so you can mix and match, the cars and the races and the types of, driving experience you've had to your heart's content. I don't know, but the Crew Motorfest is such a mess right out of the gate, despite clearly being influenced by some of the greatest racing games of all time, that I don't think it's worth it. Not one bit. Redfall. Redfall has a lot of poor execution, but it doesn't have a lot of bad ideas. The Redfall is this interesting scenario where, the folks at Arcane said, okay, we're going to try to make a multiplayer focused, open world, shooter, RPG with loot and upgrades and character leveling and different character abilities that, you know, oh, I played as this character, you played as this character, we can combine our powers to do this. And then we'll also, on top of everything else, Arcade will also try to incorporate its kind of play how you want, explore at your own pace, approach different problems with a variety of solutions and tools. On its face, you think, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. We're going to shoot vampires and I can be stealthy, or I can be, you know, guns blazing, and I can be a lady with a robot turret, or I can be a healer, or I can be, you know, a sniper or whatever, right? Doesn't sound so bad. The problem is that, like, none of the execution works. The story is non-existent. In fact, the cutscenes feel like genuinely unfinished, like they just didn't, like, oh, this is like the proof of concept for this cutscene and you're going to make a real version of this cutscene later. Nope, that's what it is. The open world is empty. There's almost nothing to do in that open world. Fighting the vampires and, well, the enemies in the game, there are human enemies with guns and stuff that you shoot. The enemies are so fucking stupid that it makes you wonder how the vampires took over the town of Redfall and, you know, enslaved the local population to begin with, considering how stupid the enemies are. The character progression and leveling is I mean, yeah, you get more powerful, but it doesn't necessarily feel any better. I never felt like I was a bigger badass by the time I was done the game compared to where I started. The gunplay doesn't feel very good. Like, shooting the guns doesn't feel great. So getting better guns doesn't solve the part where shooting the assault rifles is just kind of boring. Shooting the pistols is just kind of a pain in the ass. Oh, this gun has a stake. I have to remember that I can run up to the, you know, the vampire and stab the stake through their heart. Like, it just doesn't, you know, succeed in almost any of its ideas, despite them not being the worst ideas I've ever heard. They just don't gel. They don't work. Redfall is a bummer, and maybe they can update it. I know, you know, Pete Hines, before he left Bethesda, was out there being like, oh yeah, we're going to keep working on this game till it's done. But, there's not a lot to like about Redfall, despite its best attempts, for lack of a better word. And I just can't imagine a scenario where people are going to want to come back to that game if it is a better version of itself. Whereas something like Cyberpunk had a lot more potential at launch despite its problems. Now, I can handle bad game design, right? I can handle the bad game design that is the Crew Motorfest. I can handle the boring game design, the unfinished game design that is in Redfall. However, dear viewer, dear listener, I will not tolerate annoying, aggressive, and stupid game design like I tried to do in Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart is your worst game of 2023. It is not even close. Not even close. From the other two games, Here's the problem with Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart blows its load immediately. Immediately upon launching that game, you see all of its best, boldest, and brightest ideas, and then you actually start to play that game, and it becomes painfully obvious that for every good idea Atomic Heart has, it has a nearly infinite amount of annoying, god-awful problems. Let's get into it. Atomic Heart is a first-person shooter set in an alternate history world where what if the Soviet Union and communism rose to power and became the most technologically advanced society in the world. And now they're so advanced that they have robots, in the 50s or 60s, right? It's like, oh, what if there were big robots and the Soviet Union was the power capital of the world in the 60s or whatever. And you're like, okay, that's not sure, that's fine. I haven't read Karl Marx in a while, but sure, let's go with Soviet communist robots. Taking, being implemented in the larger part of society, and everybody's working for the greater good. Sure, sign me up. And then you meet that main character, and oh my God, that main character is a fucking turd. That guy is so annoying. I have not disliked a main character in a game. Say what you will about Johnny Silverhand, played by Keanu Reeves in Cyberpunk 2077. I would rather play as Johnny Silverhand in every video game I played for the rest of my life if I never had to play another video game with that god-awful protagonist from Atomic Heart. That guy is just, he makes my skin crawl. He's a fucking creep. He's annoying. He's not funny. He seems unlikable. There's no reason to feel empathetic or sympathetic towards him in his scenarios. He feels like a boss that you, like the guy that you want to kill. But like if Atomic Heart doesn't end with that guy getting his fucking brains blown out, I don't understand what is the point of that game. God, that character is so awful. He makes my skin crawl. And I'll say I've played some creepy games this year. I played some a variety of games, and I've been playing games for a long time. I don't know if I've ever disliked a playable protagonist in a game as much as the motherfucker from Atomic Heart. I don't even remember what his name is. It doesn't matter. He is the worst. Okay, so we have a game that, has an interesting premise that is then hampered by a main protagonist. What's so bad about it? Well, once the premise has been established, it becomes a real tedious mix, an annoying mix of first-person shooting and first-person melee with some awful, just nails on chalkboard, puzzle design. And once you kind of get through some of the early parts of the game, spoilers, the robots go crazy and start attacking everybody. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe communist robots in the 1960s or whatever wasn't such a great idea. But, and basically you find yourself in this like robot facility. You have to do a bunch of awful puzzles, and it almost has like a survival horror style to it. Like you get a shotgun, but there's hardly any bullets for the shotgun. And also the shotgun's like one of the worst shotguns I've ever used in a game. It just has no zing to it, no spice whatsoever. So instead I'm like hitting robots with a hammer, and they're like way more powerful and faster than me. And, it's like, oh, we have to go get to this place to unlock this thing to continue on the story. And eventually, once you get out of the main facility in that game, you enter the open world, which, by the way, it's kind of an open world game. And you're like, oh, fuck me. The last thing I want to do is explore large parts of this open world game, considering how bad it is when you're behind closed doors. But to make matters worse, there's nothing but like robots, like evil, powerful robots roaming the open world. So you basically have to like stealth and creep your way through large open environments to get from A to B. And if you don't, the robots will spot you and they'll basically be on alert mode. But if you try to take out the robots before they're alerted, they'll just alert more robots to come find you and kill you, to the point where you can't take on all of these robots because you've caused too much noise. You've alerted too much of the environment. And now every robot on, within earshot is trying to kill you and sending in more reinforcements. Navigating that game is a nightmare. The combat is atrocious. The puzzles are obnoxious. The main protagonist sucks. I cannot put it any other way. And then to make matters worse, what could have been an interesting concept of, for say what you will, but like, oh, Soviet alternative future robot superpower, like it just goes nowhere so quickly. That story just nosedives. It almost completely abandons any interesting idea that it has in favor of just the most monotonous and annoying game design I have come across in some time. So that is why Atomic Heart is one of and the worst game of 2023. Congratulations to Atomic Heart. You fucking suck. And I'm not saying that, the developers went out of their way to try to make an annoying game or whatever the case may be, but it seems like at every point they just decided to, at every point, the final product or component of that game was just so clawing, just so annoying and offensively bad that I was shocked as I was playing it. So congratulations to Atomic Heart for worst game of 2023. We're going to take our final break. When we come back, we're going to do the top 5 games of the year 2023 list. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. Oh, I just had a horrible flashback to the main protagonist of Atomic Heart. It seemed like every seventh thing he said was crispy critters, crispy critters, crispy critters. He also swore, but he swore like a middle school student. So imagine a grown man. Sorry, I don't mean to keep harping on Atomic Heart, but imagine a grown ass, gruff military man swearing like he was one of the kids from South Park. And that's not me picking on South Park. The reason South Park is funny is because they're kids swearing. That's part of it anyways, right? One of the things that makes South Park funny is because these kids are swearing the way that they do, right? But imagine if you were a grown, gruff military man and you just ran around saying crispy critters, fuck this, it's just, oh. And there's also the way that you upgrade your weapons and abilities is you go to a vending machine in the game, and that vending machine is horny for you. The vending machine wants you to have sex with it. And it's just, oh, I hate that game. Anyways, congratulations to Atomic Heart, worst game. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. I know this has been a long show, but I appreciate you sticking around for all of it. My top 5 games of the year 2023. We're going to go from 5 to 1. This is an ordered and ranked list, and in each game we will talk about before we move on to another game. We will talk about basically what makes that game good. And let's kick things off. Number 5, Halls of Torment. Now, Halls of Torment is a game that is in early access, but I found to be so potent and so much fun, even in its early stages of early access. Like I said, I'm not against early access, but there's something about where Halls of Torment is from a development standpoint that makes it just so much fun. What is Halls of Torment? Halls of Torment is if you took Diablo and mixed it with my number 1 game from last year, Vampire Survivors. So it is that kind of wave-based survival action arcade style game, but instead of it being, vampires, and, being very influenced by something like Castlevania, the style of it is very much influenced by something like Diablo, right? You have your demons, you have your devil type characters, your undead and all that stuff, which in fairness isn't too dissimilar from some of the enemies that you fight in something like Vampire Survivors. But again, the style and the vibes of Halls of Torment very much leaning more towards something like Diablo, especially Diablo 1. So it is very much that old school, kind of top down RPG style look to it. But you are fighting, 60,000 skeletons over the course of an hour, and you're, constantly leveling up your character and getting new upgrades and abilities. There's also different classes. I've really enjoyed playing the Archer class because the Archer class is really, really fast. So you can really zip and move around the levels to take out enemies and upgrade your critical hit abilities. The Warrior is also a lot of fun, and I haven't unlocked everything. I will say, the game's not done yet. So I will continue to play it as they upgrade and update it. But Halls of Torment is a ton of fun. I wasn't expecting to like another game like Vampire Survivors after finishing. Well, I never ended up finishing all of Vampire Survivors because again, they kept updating the game. Games are never done. Just remember that games are never done. You might think you're done a game until they update it, and then all of a sudden you're not done it. But Halls of Torment is a ton of fun. Really, like, you know, every time I do a run in Halls of Torment, I'm always like, oh, I got to do this one more time. Oh, I got to do this one more time. Oh, I just want to get this so I can get this ability, get this upgrade, get this, you know, helmet for plus 20 defense and all of that stuff. You know, oh, I want to upgrade this character. I want to finish this quest. Like always thinking about one more thing in Halls of Torment. And I imagine I'll continue to do that well into 2024 as they continue to update that game. But for where that game is right now, Halls of Torment, number 5 on my top 5 games of the year. Number 4, Resident Evil 4 Remake. Resident Evil 4 Remake is so much fun. It is so fun to see Capcom continue to, you know, modernize their Resident Evil games. And while I don't think this is the best one of those, I would still put Resident Evil 2 over Resident Evil 4. The going and playing as Leon and suplexing the villagers, you know, in Resident Evil 4, you know, doing your roundhouse kicks on the chainsaw guy, you know, trying to save the president's daughter, you know, the knife fights against the boss battles in that game, and driving the boat in the crazy lake and the big lake monster and all that shit. It's just an absolute blast. Again, Resident Evil 4 leaning a little more towards the over-the-top action horror experience than other Resident Evil games, but that didn't stop it from being an absolute blast. And I think one of the reasons why it made my list over a other remake like something like Dead Space is because Resident Evil 4 is a much older game. There's a lot more that they can work with. So even though Resident Evil 4 is a very old game by any standard, it feels so modern and so fresh because Capcom, you know, kind of let it age like a barreled whiskey long enough for it to be updated and feel modern and new. And it turns out that Resident Evil 4 is just a great game no matter how you play it, but this is the best version of Resident Evil 4 to date, unless you're a big fan of the VR version. But hey, they also did a VR version. Isn't that kind of cool? But the point is, Resident Evil 4 is a ton of fun. Continues to meet and exceed my expectations for what I want out of Capcom in terms of Resident Evil remakes, and I look forward to the future of the Resident Evil series from a remake and new game perspective. But to celebrate, Resident Evil 4 is number 4 on my top 5 games of the year for 2023. Number 3, we have El Paso Elsewhere. If you like Max Payne, if you like Remedy games, if you like when, you know, genres mix and match, you know, your noir detective shooter experience with, you know, the fantasy of mind-bending worlds, alternate realities, and vampires and werewolves and cursed demons and knights and witches, like El Paso Elsewhere, throws so much shit at the wall, and all of it sticks. And on top of that, it tells a very genuinely touching story of a failed romantic relationship. It really is a breakup game through and through, with and it is sold by and solidified by incredible voice acting from the two main characters, a wild and weird sense of humor, really dark sense of humor. Like there's some real very like dry and sarcastic humor, especially from James Savage as he's like realizing that he's going crazy trying to prevent his ex-girlfriend from, you know, becoming the Lord of Vampires and destroying the world. Like some real brilliant lines of dialogue, a very evocative but effective soundtrack from you know, featuring the main, you know, voice actor rapping on the soundtrack and all of that stuff. Like with a great look and some decent shooting. You know, it isn't just, you know, your dual pistols. You get some shotguns, you get some grenade launchers, some submachine guns, a Tommy gun. You also get a stake, like a one-hit kill. So even if you are, you know, tired of shooting, you can always like one shot stab your way through large parts of that game. Some real interesting level design and styles of levels of, oh, I'm in a pyramid now. I'm in a, you know, a pre-war like butcher meat processing plant. Now I'm in a hotel, and oh, I'm in like a, there's some cool level designs like, oh, you're in a bathroom, but this bathroom has like 80 toilets in it, but it's supposed to be a very tiny motel in the middle of nowhere, Texas, right? Like some real mind-bending stuff, similar to something like Alan Wake 2, where it's changing the world around you and things like that. But I think what really drew me in was the story, was the characters, and was the voice acting for El Paso Elsewhere, making it my number 3 on my top 5 list. Number 2, we have Trepang 2. Trepang 2 is probably the most fun I had just shooting shit in a video game this year. Trepang 2, very much inspired by games like Fear, like Killzone, like Black, and kind of a throwback to, you know, some of the, you know, so kind of the PS2, PS3 era of shooters where very over the top, to a large extent, no real strict adherence on realism or, you know, authentic military style action or things like that. Like Trepang 2 is a game, I described it on the podcast as John Woo meets John Wick, right? You can dual wield, you know, fire, flame shooting shotguns while diving in slow motion, shooting a silenced pistol, while also turning into a camouflage like Predator style to sneak up on enemies, all while your enemies are constantly on fire, constantly exploding, constantly yelling in pain and agony, while like this ripping metal is just, you know, this like kind of like new metal style music is just shredding through, you know, the level. It is over the top. It is stupid in the best way possible, but it's also just a ton of fun. Like its approach to over the top first person action is gleefully stupid. And, I could not have enjoyed it more. Yeah, it doesn't have like a very, you know, a heartfelt, meaningful story. You are a super soldier out to destroy other super soldiers by dual wielding, you know, assault rifles and diving through the air in slow motion. This isn't like this is not El Paso Elsewhere in terms of trying to tell a real heartfelt story or something like that. But Trepang 2 is just wild and explosive, top to bottom. And that is why Trepang 2 is my number 2 game of 2023. Our number 1 game, Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2 is incredible. It is so bold in its attempts to, you know, grapple the entire legacy of Remedy, the developers' history, in its attempts to be a sequel to a 13-year-old video game, in its attempts to tie together, you know, the world of Control, while also telling a standalone story. Like the fact that you can play Alan Wake 2, having never played, you know, Control or Alan Wake 1, and have it be a cohesive experience is really something, right? They really did try to make a game that is a good entry level for all players. But the fact that it can be so cohesive out of the gate for new players, while also being so rewarding for people who have stuck through with Remedy, going as far back as Max Payne 1, Alan Wake 2, Alan Wake 1 and Control is really something else. It is a truly rewarding experience. And I feel so like I finished Alan Wake 2 being like, you know what? I might not love Alan Wake 1. And I might not even love Control, but Remedy might be my favorite developer out there because there is nothing like a Remedy game. There is nothing like a Remedy game in terms of the way it rewards you for having played other games from Remedy. Mechanically, Alan Wake 2 is such an improvement over the past game. It's really something else. It's really something else. Playing as Saga Anderson and going to her mind place, and putting the Polaroid pictures on the wall, connecting the red string to what's going on in the story is a lot of fun. And the reason it's so much fun, one of the reasons why, is because isn't it just cool to do that type of detective shit? Like actually, physically put the story together yourself. Like that's a lot of fun. But on top of that, it also is a helpful reminder of the story so far. You can always go back to the Mind Palace in that game as Saga Anderson and be like, what's going on in the story? What the fuck are we doing? What's going on? Who's this? Who's that? Why is the dark presence and the dark place and all this stuff the way it is? One of the reasons that they do that is because Saga Anderson, the character, is kind of the audience for people who didn't play Alan Wake 1 or Control. More so Alan Wake 1. Because she doesn't know why Alan Wake has, been doing what he's been doing since the first game. She doesn't know why Bright Falls, the town, is so fucked up. She doesn't know what the hell's going on, right? She's there to investigate these ritualistic, murders that have been happening in the woods, only to discover that there's a much greater conspiracy that runs deep and has been going on for quite some time since the original Alan Wake. So for fans of the series, you get a wonderful reminder of all the things that have happened in Alan Wake 1. For people who haven't, you are playing as somebody who does not know the story, the full story, and you still get to piece it all together as if it's a fresh thing. So it's almost like this crazy thing where they just managed to retell Alan Wake 1 in Alan Wake 2 for those who didn't play it. And for those that did, it was a long ass time ago, or probably a long ass time ago. So you get a refresher on the story anyways. That makes for a brilliant game in terms of storytelling. Obviously, doing the detective shit as Saga Anderson is a lot of fun, but it's so effective and it makes so much sense. Like it's not just detective work just to string the story together. It's to remind you of what happened and also allow you as a new player to experience that story kind of for the first time. Now, obviously, as Alan Wake, when you play Alan Wake, you have already experienced all of the shit that has happened, right? So if you had never played Alan Wake before and you're like, man, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? What is he doing, right? You might want to spend some more time as Saga Anderson playing through her story before you got a good sense of why Alan Wake is in the situation he's in starting in Alan Wake 2. But the way that the story is non-linear, like you could go play, hours and hours of Saga Anderson's story, go back and play a couple levels of Alan Wake and then go back to Saga, and it's all cohesive. It all makes sense, is super, super neat. Now, obviously, the story does have an ending. So there is a part in the game where it's like, hey, you've done all of the levels of Saga, or you've done all of the levels of Alan Wake. You need to go back and play the rest of the other character to catch them up to where the story point is for whoever you've been playing as. But it's effective. It works. Getting to Alan Wake's, world that he finds himself in, and, rewriting the story in so basically the writer's room in Alan Wake's campaign in story is kind of like Saga's, where he's there piecing the story together from what he's been seeing. But what he does is he rewrites the story as he's experienced it to change the environment around him for puzzle solving purposes and for navigation purposes. Whereas Saga is in a situation where she's piecing together what she physically sees. Alan is rewriting what has been going on in order to further the story for himself. And that's without me trying to spoil anything. And getting to see the way that the worlds twist and turn to Alan's writing is a ton of fun. Where that story goes is just so wild and crazy. The FMV that they shot is so much fun. Seeing those actors interact with, the in-game characters and the other actors in the game is an absolute blast. That story, despite being a total mindfuck, and despite being a story that you can play in pretty much any order, going back and forth between Saga's story and Alan Wake, it's totally cohesive. It's totally, it made sense to me. I mean, there are some parts that they, that I'm not too much of an expert on, but I was like, yeah, okay, this makes sense by the end of that story. The old guards of Asgard, the fake band that they had made for Alan Wake 1 being in Alan Wake 2, the musical numbers in that game are just so fucking rad and so much fun, both from a gameplay perspective, but the writing of the music is good. I was listening to Herald of Darkness, on my iPhone on Apple Music not that long ago, just like, that song just being fucking rad. Seeing, James McCaffrey, the late James McCaffrey's final performance. We'll see what happens with the Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes, but he gives a tremendous performance as Alex Casey, the detective partner of Saga Anderson, who happens to share the same name as the fictional character in Alan Wake's novels and detective novels that he's been writing, and what's going on with him. Super cool. The way they connect, the secret agency, the Federal Bureau of Control. It's so good. And yeah, shining the light on to stun the enemies isn't my idea of fun third person shooting experience, but exploring that environment, getting lost in the creepy woods. There's a level that you go to. So actually the thing about Saga and Alan Wake is that you can explore their worlds pretty freely. Like each world that they are in is kind of an open world. So if you play a Saga, you can go back to previous levels that you've played just by walking around the environment. And if you want to pick up collectibles, or if you want to find your missing upgrades and items, you can do all that stuff, which is a lot of fun. Now, obviously you can't unlock and get to every level until you've played it, but there is a part in the story where basically they're like, hey, if you want to go and freely explore the levels that you've already been to, you can. You might have keys and items to unlock doors you couldn't get to in the first place, which is really cool. But even just playing through the story levels that take place in those levels at the first time around is cool. There's a again, without spoiling anything, there's a amusement park in Bright Falls called Coffee World. And Coffee World is supposed to be like, some cheap little amusement park designed to attract kids and families, but it's all about coffee. And the mascot is this like teacup with eyes, and he's a fucking creep, and it's maybe haunted, and there's a bunch of bad shit happening at Coffee World. And to just walk through this like really, well realized, creepy amusement park, super cool. There's a part that takes place in like an old folks care home that is both, really creepy just from a horror standpoint, but also the idea that like, something could be happening to these folks in this, facility that's meant to take care of them. Really wild. Man, Alan Wake 2 is amazing. It is such a surprise that I liked it as much as I did, coming off of, kind of being so about Alan Wake 1 and Control, but they really put together an incredible game, both from a cohesive standpoint, but even from a gameplay standpoint, but also from a tone and vibes and presentation and confidence standpoint. The way that it honors so much of Remedy's, and my interpretation anyways, of honoring so much of Remedy's legacy for decades now. Alan Wake 2 really is an incredible video game, and that is why Alan Wake 2 is my number one game of 2023. Let's go ahead now and go through every category and the winners, and then we'll wrap this up. What do you say? What's Old is New Again, Game of the Year. The nominees were Hitman, World of Assassination, Titanfall 2, and the winner, Cyberpunk 2077. For best 2023 game I didn't get a chance to play / game I wanted to get around to playing, the nominees were Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, Sea of Stars, Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 15, and the winner was Spider-Man 2. My most anticipated game, assuming these games come out in 2024, in no particular order and with all of them being winners in my heart, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Helldivers 2, Thank Goodness You're Here, Skate, and Hades 2. For best horror game, we have the nominees are Alan Wake 2, Resident Evil 4, and Dead Space Remake being the winner. Most disappointing game, the nominees were Hogwarts Legacy, City Skylines 2, and the winner, Destiny 2 Lightfall. For best surprise, Alan Wake 2 as one of the nominees, Hitman Freelancer Mode as one of the nominees, and the winner for best surprise, El Paso Elsewhere. Biggest news story, the nominees were Embracer Group, just buying everything and then shutting everything down. Unity's horrible, terrible, very bad pricing policy change, and the winner, Microsoft buying Activision for biggest news story. Best time sync, the nominees were Diablo 4, Forza Motorsport, and the winner, Hitman Freelancer Mode. For best vibes, the nominees were Alan Wake 2, Hogwarts Legacy, and the winner, El Paso Elsewhere. The winner, or I guess I should say loser, the biggest loser, and I'm not talking about the reality show. The winner for worst game, the nominees were The Crew Motorfest, Redfall, and the winner, and it ain't even close, Atomic Heart. I didn't finish Atomic Heart because it was so bad. I at least finished Redfall. So to give Redfall some credit, I managed to see that that game through to the end. And my top 5 games of the year for 2023 list. Number 5, Halls of Torment. Number 4, Resident Evil 4. That is the remake. Number 3, El Paso Elsewhere. Number 2, Trepang 2. And the number 1 game of 2023, in my very humble opinion, Alan Wake 2. Congratulations to all the winners. Congratulations to Atomic Heart. Not to keep picking on Atomic Heart. We are going to take a break. When I say break, I mean we're going to take a week off of this podcast. So the next time you hear me will be we're going to record the 11th of January. I'm going to take a week off. Going to try to produce some more video content, no podcasting content for the next week. Also give me time to catch up on some games. Maybe I'll be able to talk about some of the best games of 2023 that I didn't get a chance to play next year. We shall see how that goes. And then of course, if once we do that podcast on the 11th, we'll be very, very close to the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown coming out. So we have a lot to look forward to. Glitch Report is not slowing down. We're just going to take a week off, and we will see you all in the new year. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast, supporting the video show, however you choose to support it. Find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, wherever you are going, I'm probably there. Come chat me up however you choose to. And thank you so much for listening, watching, and supporting. I have been GnittWitt, GnittWitt, again, wherever you want to check me out on social media. Thank you so much for a wonderful year of games. Thank you so much for a wonderful year of the show. We'll see you all in the new year. Happy gaming. Take it easy.